This one thing called Colleague.skill caught fire last week. This is an AI agent that gathers departing colleagues' Slack emails and files, then generates an MD file that you can put together, directly feeds to AI to do the colleague's job as they would. Then someone built an Anti-Distill skill to fight back. Basically, an agent to prevent yourself from being skillified. This Anti-Distill promises everything that makes you irreplaceable and exactly what the system wants to extract in the first place. It's not going to be in the file that you left behind. So here's a question. Has your boss already asked you to install the Colleague.skill? Or is it time maybe to consider deploy some kind of anti-distilled measure? I'll tell you all about it in this one, including all the research, so you can decide whether to panic or not. Distill your colleague. Have you seen this movie, Perfume, the story of a murderer? Contextually, there are films with premises closer to what I'm about to cover here, like uploading consciousness, cloning memories, and so on. But Perfume is really just that movie I could not shake when I first saw Colleague.skill. The main character, if you've never seen this movie, is born with an extraordinary sense of smell. He becomes obsessed with capturing people's scent and believed that if he can extract their substance into a bottle, he possesses something more permanent than a person themselves, which makes the bottle the essence of a person. Now, here's the introduction of the Colleague.skill README file. It says, turn the coldness of departuring into the warmth of a skill. Welcome to cyber immortality. The installation was also pretty straightforward. The only thing you need to do was to export a departing colleague's Slack messages, Google documents, and work emails, then feed them into this tool. Then what AI would do is to generate a skill file, for example, like writes code following their technical standards or reply to message in their tone, and even knows when they're typically dodge blames and so on and so forth. If you scroll down further to the commentary, you would also see some very sharp comments, such as, a colleague when scattered, their tokens, when assembled, they're a skill. But then I saw another project called Anti-Distill skill. Anti-Distill. Really how Kafka that your colleague leaves, but their ghost stays in MD file. Somehow it's like going for a health checkup. The doctor tells you, congratulations, you have great vitals. So they decided to photocopy your organs, then they can use the transplant to other patients. You're free to go though. Now, in order for you to counter this, you have to find another doctor to tamper with the data so the photocopied organs don't actually work. Absurd as it sounds, it's happening. And someone decided to counter it. So here's what Anti-Distill does. You feed your completed skill file, and then it output a version that looks thorough and professional. What it does underneath is it automatically identifies the replaceability level of each section of your skills, and it replaces core knowledge with correct but useless filler. So it outputs in two different versions. One is the sanitized version for the company. In-text structure, terminology, very professional, it reads fine, but the core is hollowed out. And then you will also get a private backup that's pretty much for yourself, include judgment intuition, interpersonal network, or intuition for handling edge cases. Everything that makes you irreplaceable. By the way, please share this with your colleague. If you see the hype button, please don't forget to hype this video so more people can see it. AI versus manual handover. So some people are debating whether this counts as workplace manipulation. To be honest, I don't think that's quite the right framing because manipulation implies conscious intent. But most companies that do things like this likely didn't even think it through. To most people, this is just a handover. I will explain the word just later. But let's focus on the act of handover itself first. In the old days, we asked those about to leave to prepare some pages of handover document so the next person can read and hopefully have a better understanding of the job. But not many people realize the old handover was already broken actually. We just didn't notice it because there was no better alternative to compare it to. There are two things that I've seen so many times in the last few years that people always forget. First, the tool changed and the nature of what's happening changed with it. But secondly, and more importantly, the need stays exactly the same. In both the old and the new handover, that you get someone, either a person or a machine, to compile what a departing colleague knew. The old version asked the learner to sit down and write it. The new version scraped their digital footprint and lets AI assemble it. Different method, but with the exact same goal, capturing what's in someone's head before they walked out of the door. So at least we'll agree the need is identical. In practice, however, barely anyone wrote a proper document, and not to mention barely anyone reads the ones that were written. The leaver were already mentally halfway out of the door, thinking about their next shop, not carefully encoding the last 5 years of institutional memory into a Google Doc. And even when they tried, they couldn't. The expertise are so embedded in their own routines that they don't even know what they know. There are many studies suggest the conventional handover misses about 70% of the decision-making knowledge that actually matters. So where does AI make it different? Not better, different, and in some ways, actively worse. Glitch number 1. AI has no bullshit filter. When human writes a handover, you'd already self-edited without even thinking about it. But you also skipped the workaround that you've stopped using a while ago. You likely leave out a sarcastic rant about a client from hell. AI, however, in just everything with equal weight. Very important to keep this in mind because it changes everything. Because it is really likely the frustrated Slack message you fired off in a small ranting channel, we all have one of those, that's somehow now your communication style. Or the decisions you've made, agreed with the lead engineer in a spring prep meeting, the hacky fix that you used once because a mission-critical system was broken, could very likely now be the standard operation procedure in handling a system meltdown. When a human filter unknowingly separates signal from noise, current from outdated, intentional from accidental, AI treats your entire digital history as equally valid and equally intentional. Glitch number 2. AI creates the illusion of completeness. A 3-pages manually curated Google document announces its own gap. Anyone who reads it knows it's incomplete because no one looks at the 3 pages and think, yeah, this has fully captured what Sarah knew after 5 years. If this is true, then Sarah really didn't do much work. However, a 20,000 words AI-generated scale file does the complete opposite. It has this facade of thoroughness. It has sections, subsections, it covers communication patterns, technical standards, and decision-making tendencies. It really reads like a comprehensive portrait of your ex-colleague. So the box is checked. No one goes looking into what's missing because why check if you already have AI gathering everything about that person? Even if you want to, where do you even start? Because checking would just defeat the purpose in the first place. The old handover failed, honestly. However, the new one fails while looking like it succeeded. Just like this old question, do you rather be cheated by your partner and not knowing, or do you prefer to be told straight away? Glitch number 3. AI collapses context, or just didn't have one to start with. Messages exist in moments, so no, not all conversations with your colleagues are on Zoom, Slack, or email, unless a company sets a strict rule from now on that you are strictly not allowed to speak to each other during your coffee breaks, walk to the meeting room, or in an after-work drink section. There's always so much more subtle and unspoken context exchange in those moments than what's being recorded. Or you can think of it like the telephone game. So what someone actually knows as the original message, a fraction of it then made it to Slack messages and emails. It's already, keep in mind, a loosely compression version. AI then scrapes those fragments, interprets them, and then produces a scale file, a 3rd generation copy. Each handover strips the context. Glitch number 4, AI copies the what, but not the why. Not to mention people evolve and the circumstances change. Very often we abandon our old approach, change our mind, and then maybe learn from our mistakes. Your communication history from 2023 doesn't really reflect who you were by 2025. Therefore, A decision you made yesterday isn't going to be a good reference of what you're likely to do under a really similar situation in 2027 when you're clones in the picture rather than the real you. Let's say a colleague that always applies a 15% discount for one particular client. The AI captures the pattern, says client X gets 15% off. But maybe the reason was that the client X referred a few enterprise accounts last year, and the discount was an informal thank you. What's likely going to happen is that when the referral dries up, the AI keeps discounting, or even worse, it starts pattern matching and offering 15% to all clients. This is pattern without reasoning. It works until the condition change, and the condition always change. In fact, change is a good thing for most business. Do you want new clients, or an upgraded new system, or a new regulation that plays in your favor? The moment a context shift, a pattern without a reasoning is going to be useless, or even worse, misleading. Because it'll tell you to do that one thing that used to work perfectly, and it would tell you that confidently, without having any bit of understanding why it worked, whether it still should. A human colleague, even a mediocre one, can still say, I do this way because. An AI skill file, however, would just said, this is how it was done. And there's no way for AI to know any of those. Now, let's talk about the problems before the problem. There's a line of fine print in the Colleague.skill README that most people probably missed. Here's what it says. Source material quality equals to skill quality. So you'll prefer chat logs plus long documents 10 times more than manual description only. Basically, this tool works best with thoughtful, voluntary, long-form writing. The kind of writing that not many people produce at work, unless the part of their job is documentation. Now, let's go through a few gaps. Gap number 1, externalizing text doesn't come naturally. The text interface that AI often have access to is Slack or Teams, messages, emails, code comments, Google Documents, and so on. Only a tip of iceberg though. Research consistently tells us how small that layer is. NASA actually conducted an internal study on this exact problem. They found 60% of their own workforce couldn't even identify a process for capturing a departing colleague's knowledge. Worse off, only 14% were satisfied with how offboarding works. A senior engineer at NASA put it, we cannot put in paper-based process to transfer knowledge. What we're losing is a decade of experience. When senior engineers retire, the experience cannot be written down and referred to as a cookbook for doing the job. If NASA can't do it, your company most certainly can't either. Scraping someone's Slack message and call it a day isn't going to cut it. Now, gap number 2, and you see this very often, false beliefs in AI and in offboarding. The real problem isn't just that AI misses the important stuff, but the C-level who pushes for it or believe that this is entirely possible. For example, the latest news of how Meta is building an AI Mark Zuckerberg, trained on his mannerism, tone, and strategic thinking, so employees can interact with it instead of him. Zuckerberg genuinely believes that he can be bottled and serve it as scale. So you see more and more C-levels believe that AI is the next knowledge management to pursue, and there are less and less value in keeping the actual person around. Gap number 3, humans, or say human interaction, unspoken rules, relationships. As I mentioned in another article, humans are the rate limiting factor in any organization. Say, cooking dinner. You can chop vegetables in 2 minutes, boil pasta in 8, but if the sauce takes 30 minutes to simmer, then the meal takes 30 minutes. So basically, complex human judgment, consensus, politics, regulations, interpersonal relationships, you name it. Just have a think. What normally stops you from moving a project forward? Was it technology? Unlikely, because 99% of the companies on Earth are not cutting-edge tech companies. You're solving problems that happen because your customers are humans. The slowest part in any of our system isn't AI. You see the bottleneck is still there, and the person who knew how to get past it only left behind an MD file, so the team will very soon find even more tiresome to deal with. Is it just a handover or an infringement of your right? On to the ownership question. A researcher at a leading Chinese university who studied the intersection of AI policy and labor rights said in the recent interview that what companies acquire through salary is merely the rights to use knowledge during the employment period, not ownership. So when someone leaves, their experience should leave with them, which I actually don't entirely agree with. Think of a job function or a practice, let's say product management in software. Even if you're the best product person on earth, you still likely following the practice of writing PRDs, running discovery sessions, grooming backlogs, and facilitating sprint reviews. These aren't your practices, they're disciplines. The company paid you to apply them in context to their users, their code base, and their market. The artifacts you produced while doing so, the roadmaps or the specs, are working products. They always belong to the company. So no, experience doesn't live with you in this entirety. A chunk of it was never exclusively yours to begin with. But here's the twist. The parts that was yours, such as your instinct for when a feature request is redundant, or your read on which engineer is only going to duct tape the issue and so on, as I mentioned, are exactly the part no MD file will ever capture. I see the ownership debate as a distraction because the stuff companies can extract are arguably theirs to begin with, and the stuff that's truly yours, they couldn't take it if they want to. Please do note, this is not the same as copyright work. Fully supports the artist's right not to be cloned. Colleague.md is a failed attempt to industrialize growth and heritage. Japan has a repair heritage called Kintsugi. Basically, broken ceramics mended with gold. The cracked balls ended up worth more than the one that was never broken. Colleague.skill tries to skip the breaking altogether because to many managers, the breaking is slow, is imperfect, and is full of flaws that need fixing. Yes, AI files don't freeze up. AI doesn't need a break. AI doesn't make mistakes, well, in a way. And it doesn't second guess its decision. While you do all of the above, you break, you get into conflict with colleagues, you don't applaud when your boss is patronizing you. You're imperfect, yes, but Kintsugi doesn't work on a ball that was never cracked. And exactly this imperfection makes us more valuable with time, not less. This is an episode of the Why AI Doesn't Replace X series. So if you're fed up by hype, watch more to learn why your job isn't at risk.